Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
When Shirley saw the person clearly, she was stunned. It was Zacharias. She gazed at the man beneath the umbrella, who was as calm as water, but his deep eyes revealed a sense of compassion and tenderness toward her. The snowflakes were shielded by the umbrella, creating a small world exclusively for them. At that moment, the world seemed to grow quieter. "Why did you come?" Shirley asked. Her face was disheveled as she wiped away the tears and turned her face aside to hide her tears from the man. However, Zacharias had already seen what he needed to see. "Did you go to see Cole?" he guessed. "This is my private matter, and I don't want to discuss it," she refused to answer. "Did he reject you?" he asked as he analyzed the situation from Cole's perspective. He knew that Cole would choose to let go wisely. At this moment, Zacharias also comprehended that Cole's feelings for Shirley were sincere, which explained his decision to let go. This was a result of the realization that, due to his profession, Cole couldn't offer her a stable future. Zacharias empathized with Cole's choice, acknowledging that if their roles were reversed, he would make the same decision. The willingness to endure temporary pain for the sake of securing a better future for her was a testament to the depth of his affection. She bit her lip and remained silent, as this man had already guessed everything, and she had nothing more to say. In the car not far away, Tony sat observing the pair under the umbrella. Though he couldn't eavesdrop on their conversation, he sensed an unusual level of care Zacharias was displaying toward Shirley. Zacharias had left the residence to pick her up and shield her from the snow with an umbrella, privileges not typically afforded to ordinary bodyguards. Tony suddenly realized why Zacharias had driven him away the last time he expressed his desire to make Shirley his girlfriend. This discovery left Tony feeling somewhat resentful. He thought, So, it seems that Uncle Zacharias has been interested in this female bodyguard all along. He continued to observe the romantic scene under the umbrella. He couldn't help but feel a sense of annoyance at how the situation was unfolding. It suddenly dawned on him that Shirley might become his aunt in the future, and this idea filled him with a strange mix of emotions. It was as if something valuable to him was slipping away. As a result of the inner turmoil she felt, Shirley's body and spirit turned cold, causing her to shiver. She embraced her arms, realizing that she had worn a uniform when she ventured out this time, and only now did she sense the cold. "Get in the car," Zacharias urged. She didn't want to ride in his car. She pointed toward Tony's car and said, "I'll ride in Mr. Tony's car." Without waiting for the man to respond, she hurried into the snow and ran toward Tony's car. Tony, who had been silently envious, suddenly felt elated, realizing that his goddess had chosen him. He alighted from the car, walked around the front, and opened the passenger door for her, saying, "Goddess, please get in." Shirley expressed her gratitude and promptly took the front seat. He immediately got into the car, casting a glance at Zacharias, who remained in the snow and firmly pressed the gas pedal. The car surged forward. Roy approached and said, "Mr. Flintstone, please get into the car. It's not good for your health to stay out in the cold." Zacharias nodded and turned to walk toward his car. At the first red light they reached, Tony noticed a noticeable change in Shirley's mood. She appeared to be wrapped in a heavy shroud of melancholy, and her thoughts seemed far removed from their surroundings. Concerned, he couldn't help but inquire, "Goddess, what's troubling you? Who has caused you this distress?" She shook her head, her thoughts filled with the memory of Cole's resolute departure. "It's nothing," she replied, her voice tinged with sadness. "Just focus on driving." She wouldn't stand in the way of Cole's future, but the wave of sadness inside her was undeniable. The future she had envisioned had suddenly shattered, and this was her first love, cut short before it could even begin. In her heart, she extended her well wishes for Cole's future and a safe journey ahead. Then, in an unexpected twist, she turned to Tony and said, "Do you frequent bars? Would you mind taking me to one tonight to help me unwind?" Tony was initially surprised, then delighted. "Of course, we can go. I'm a regular at the bar, and I'll reserve a private area for us tonight. I promise you'll have a great time." Shirley had never been to a bar before. Her father's restrictions and her busy schedule had kept her away. However, today, she suddenly felt the urge to let loose and unwind. While he focused on driving, he couldn't help but worry that she might have a change of heart. "Goddess, it's a deal," he said, maintaining a hopeful tone. "Okay," she said. "All right, but we must keep this a secret from Uncle Zacharias. If he finds out I took you to the bar, he won't let me hear the end of it." Shirley concurred, nodding in agreement. "Okay, we won't tell him." At this moment, they both felt like rebellious teenagers sneaking away for a night of adventure. Back at the Flintstone residence, Shirley and Tony exchanged contact information before she retreated to her room. Soon after, Zacharias' motorcade returned. He walked into her room, lingered for a few seconds, and then quietly left. Later in the evening, Zacharias had to attend to work, and Freddie brought a stack of documents for him to review and sign. As dinner time approached, Zacharias and Tony shared a meal, but she expressed her disinterest in eating. Understanding her feelings, Zacharias didn't insist on her joining them for dinner. After he finished his meal, he returned to his study to work. Around 8 p.m., Tony messaged Shirley to inform her that he had booked a private area and they could leave at 8:30 p.m. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, reading Tony's message. Realizing her attire was unfit for a bar, she began to search through her wardrobe. She opened her closet and spotted the tight-fitting miniskirt she had bought with Willow during their shopping trip. At the time, she had thought of wearing it for Cole on a special occasion, but now, there was no chance to show it to him. She slipped into the miniskirt and added a khaki windbreaker. Her long hair cascaded down, and she exuded a confident and stylish charm. Having grown up around men, she had a unique, self-assured allure. As Shirley descended the stairs, Tony was captivated. He watched in awe as she gracefully made her way down. She emitted an aura of independence and strength. At that moment, he felt a sense of inadequacy, realizing that he may not be the kind of man deserving of her, but rather someone more like Zacharias, a mature and composed man. "Let's go," he whispered, his voice tinged with excitement. "I just checked, and my uncle is still working. He won't notice us." She nodded and followed him outside. Then, Tony started the car, and they drove off. In the study, Zacharias heard the sound of a vehicle and recognized that it was Tony's car. He furrowed his brow while wondering where Tony was going so late, but he didn't want to interfere with his private life as long as he didn't cause trouble. Unbeknownst to him, Shirley was in the car with Tony. He drove her to a high-end bar in the city, which was a popular spot for wealthy young people. He knew the area well, and even his car had a VIP parking space. She followed him to the entrance of the brightly lit bar, which exuded a cool, high-tech atmosphere and a sense of excitement. "This place opened a year ago, and it's packed every night. The atmosphere inside is amazing," Tony said. He was excited today because he was bringing a beautiful woman to the bar, which was quite exhilarating. However, he didn't dare to have any ulterior motives toward Shirley. In his heart, he had already categorized her as a good friend and a close comrade. He was aware of his place and knew that he wasn't worthy of pursuing her romantically. Nevertheless, taking her out to have fun made him feel accomplished and added to their strong bond as friends. Shirley settled into a cozy booth with the heating on, feeling the warmth her coat provided. She unfastened her belt and slipped out of her coat, revealing a captivating blue dress that radiated her charming and elegant beauty. Tony had just ordered a set meal from the waiter. When he turned around, he saw her sitting on the red couch. Her alluring blue sweater dress was sensual and captivating, making her look like a wild and untamed cat. Yet, beneath the allure, there was a palpable danger emanating from her. Shirley's presence quickly drew the attention of those around her, particularly the men. They were like predators, captivated by her uniqueness and irresistibly drawn to her. Their gazes remained fixed on her, reflecting an eagerness to embark on an adventure with her. Sensing the attention of the men around her, she locked eyes with them, her cool gaze communicating a sense of conquest. This girl embodied a wild, captivating beauty that was worth the risk despite her initially aloof demeanor. The men had grown tired of the ordinary, docile girls and found her wild, untamed charm all the more captivating. However, their assessment was somewhat off the mark. She was not a mere wildcat, she was a dangerous wild leopard. Soon, their meal arrived. It featured a fruit platter and a variety of beverages, with a wide selection that would undoubtedly satisfy anyone looking to drink and unwind. Squinting her eyes, Shirley selected a bottle and poured herself half a glass. Tony quickly followed suit, raising his glass. "Goddess, for now, forget everything else and just enjoy the moment. Here's to you." She clinked glasses with him and took a sip. The fiery liquor stung her throat, but she welcomed the sensation, seeking excitement to elevate her mood. Shirley pondered whether getting drunk could offer solace, help her come to terms with her situation, or perhaps uplift her spirits. After downing half a glass, she ventured to sample another type of alcohol. It was precisely at this moment that some of Tony's friends approached. Among them was a wealthy heir who showed a keen interest in her. Accompanied by two girls, the trio of young men appeared. Two of them already had their arms wrapped around the girls, which left the wealthy young man without a companion. His earlier female companion had been dismissed to make room for his interest in getting to know Shirley. "Tony, you didn't invite us." "What? Do you think you're too good for us?" Tony chuckled and responded, "Come on, guys. I just made plans with a friend." "Hey, where did you make this friend? We haven't seen her before." Derek Gaines, the wealthy young man, approached Tony and, while casually draping an arm around his shoulder, fixed his gaze on Shirley, scrutinizing her. In his eyes, Shirley exuded an undeniable allure, and he was convinced that his wealth and influence could effortlessly win her over. "What's your name, miss?" Derek asked with a direct smile. "I'm not interested in getting to know you," Shirley replied coldly. Sensing an intrusion on their peaceful evening, Tony swiftly intervened, saying, "My friend prefers a quiet environment. Why don't you all leave for now?" "Oh. This kind of personality is what I like." Derek not only didn't leave, but also started showing off his authority. Shirley frowned, frustrated that her desire to enjoy her drink was disrupted. She urged Tony, please ask them to leave." Tony turned to Derek, reaffirming her wishes, "Did you hear that? My friend wants you to leave." Derek raised an eyebrow and countered, "Tony, your friend is our friend." He extended his hand toward Shirley and introduced himself, "Let me introduce myself. I'm the vice president of Starlight Group, and my dad is the president. Let's be friends." Uninterested, she didn't even bother to look at Derek. At that moment, Tony felt the urge to use the restroom and told her, "Goddess, I need to use the restroom." "Go ahead. I'll take good care of your friend." Derek seized the opportunity to keep Tony away for a while, hoping to get closer to Shirley. As Tony left, Derek promptly shifted over and sat down closer to Shirley. She was wearing a tight skirt, and her long, slender legs caught his attention. He immediately swallowed hard while appreciating the beauty of her legs. Shirley's legs weren't just slender, but they exuded a powerful beauty that one would assume felt particularly exciting to the touch. Derek poured himself a drink and extended a glass toward her. "Pretty, I'll raise a glass to you. Do me the honor, will you?" Shirley didn't even bother to respond. However, the two men who were quite attached to Derek were immediately displeased. One of them frowned and said, "Hey, Derek bought you a drink. Aren't you going to have a drink with him?" Shirley replied coldly, "I don't want to drink." The man, who had been humiliated by her, suddenly pushed away the girl beside him and pointed at Shirley while saying, "Don't disrespect me." However, when he extended his finger toward Shirley, she grabbed it and pulled it forcefully, causing it to dislocate with a loud crack. "Ah!" The man cried out in pain as he stared at his dislocated finger in disbelief. His eyes were filled with rage. He instantly grabbed a wine bottle and intended to smash it at Shirley to vent his anger. Men frequenting bars were known for their hot tempers, let alone this man determined to regain his pride and assert his dominance in front of his friends. "You brat," he cursed while preparing to hurl the wine bottle at her to teach her a lesson. Shirley's eyes darkened. She was already unhappy with the man for shoving his companion earlier, and now, seeing him attempting to be physical with her, her mood worsened even further. Since someone had voluntarily come seeking a fight, she decided not to hold back. As the man was about to strike, she swiftly rose from her seat. She struck the man's wrist with a precise kick and made him release his grip on the wine bottle. With the bottle in midair and about to crash to the ground, she kicked it again, and the wine bottle soared up into the air before landing steadily in her hand as if it had eyes. Her movements were graceful, agile, and seamless. In the next moment, she brought the wine bottle down on the man's head. He was terrified and screamed, but just when the bottle was mere inches away from his head, it stopped. The man was shaken, but he was grateful that the bottle had not struck him. Shirley didn't intend to waste a perfectly good bottle of wine and gently placed it back on the table. In the next moment, she delivered a punch to the man's face. His head rang with pain as he recoiled from the blow. She pointed at him. "Respect women, or else I'll beat you to a pulp." He held their breath, afraid even to say a word. Derek, who had been attempting to get closer to Shirley, was now inching away cautiously after witnessing her actions. He didn't want to offend this dangerous woman, as the consequences of provoking her were not something he wanted to face. "You brat," the man who had been punched still wore an angry expression and seemed ready to fight back. However, Shirley heard him mutter profanity and swiftly reacted. She extended her leg and kicked the man, pinning him down on the couch. Her long and slender leg felt like a sharp sword that was capable of breaking several of his rib bones at any moment. "I dare you to say it again." Shirley's gaze was icy cold. The man finally felt a wave of fear wash over him. The fierce strength in her eyes and the pressure she exerted on his chest with her foot were intimidating. If he provoked her again, she could very well incapacitate him. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize on behalf of my friend." "Miss, please calm down." Derek was willing to swallow his pride and beg her. He could sense that Shirley was no ordinary person, and she might have a powerful background that they shouldn't mess with. "Sorry. I apologize. I'm sorry. I won't dare to do it again. Spare me, please." The man finally admitted defeat. At that moment, Tony had returned from the restroom. He had taken a phone call in there, so he took some time. However, when he returned to his seat and saw Shirley dealing with the situation, his eyes widened in surprise. "Goddess, please spare my friend." Tony pleaded for his friend with folded hands. Only then did Shirley retract her foot and say to Tony, "There's no need to be friends with people like that in the future." He quickly nodded and said, "All right. I'll listen to you." After that, he quickly gave Derek a look. Derek promptly took his friends away. Soon, Derek messaged Tony. "What's your friend's background?" Tony replied without hesitation, "Someone you shouldn't mess with." He said this because the person backing Shirley was his uncle. If his uncle were to find out that she was being harassed at the bar, Tony would definitely suffer a severe beating. However, he didn't mention that Shirley had a background that was genuinely beyond these people's reach. Shirley was feeling even more frustrated. Her mood, which was already bad, had been further spoiled by these men. She picked up a glass and a bottle, the contents of which she did not bother to identify, and poured herself a drink before downing it. To her, the taste of the alcohol didn't matter. As long as it entered her stomach, it was fine. They say that alcohol could chase away sorrows, so she wanted to test its effectiveness. Now, not only did Derek dare not approach her again, but the men who had witnessed Shirley's abilities were also keeping their gazes averted. They could only sneak glances at her if they wanted to look at her. Tony had just replied to a few messages, and when he looked up, he saw Shirley drinking again. He was starting to get worried. He couldn't let her get too drunk. Goddess, let's stop drinking. You've had too much. You'll get drunk. I'm here to do exactly that. Shirley was still quite sober at the moment. It felt like these drinks weren't really doing much. However, she had a much stronger willpower than most people, so the alcohol had not kicked in yet. At this moment, at the Flintstone residence, Zacharias had just finished his work for the day. He rubbed his temples and checked the time on his wristwatch. It was already 10 o'clock p.m. He immediately thought of the girl who hadn't even come downstairs for dinner and wondered if he should invite her out for a meal. He went to the second floor and headed straight to Shirley's room. Then, he knocked on the door. There was no response from the inside. Zacharias' eyebrows furrowed. Could this girl be so heartbroken over Cole that she had done something foolish? This thought made his chest ache for a few seconds. Then, he opened the door and entered. The room was pitch dark, with no lights turned on. He thought that maybe she was asleep. Zacharias walked up to the bed, but it was neatly made. There was no one lying on it. He turned on the light and found that the room was empty. Where was Shirley? He couldn't find her anywhere. He found a set of clothes that she had taken off on the couch. He furrowed his eyebrows. Weren't these the same clothes she was wearing earlier? Why did she take them off? Zacharias suddenly remembered that Tony had started the car engine at around 8 o'clock p.m. Did he take Shirley out somewhere? He confirmed this thought. Then, he immediately left the room, went to his study, grabbed his phone, and called Tony. In the bar, Tony saw his phone screen light up. When he picked it up and saw the caller ID, he thought to himself, uh-oh. It was Zacharias. Zacharias must have found out that he had taken Shirley out. He turned to Shirley and said, "Goddess, we should go back. My uncle is looking for us. I don't want to go back yet." Shirley waved her hand while feeling a sudden rush of alcohol. "No. We really must go back," Tony said before reaching out to pull her. Shirley reluctantly got up and grabbed her coat. Tony didn't dare to answer Zacharias' call in the bar. Once they were outside the bar, he finally answered the call right before Zacharias hung up. "Hello, Uncle Zacharias. Where have you taken her?" Zacharias questioned him on the other end. "Oh. We're just out for a walk. She was in a bad mood, so I took her for a stroll," Tony quickly explained. Afterward, he looked back but realized that Shirley had wandered off in a different direction. Tony realized that things were getting serious now. Shirley was drunk to the point where she couldn't distinguish her directions. "Uncle Zacharias, I'm hanging up now. We're on our way back," Tony said and quickly hung up Zacharias' call. He reached out to grab Shirley and said, "Goddess, my car is here." She was supporting her forehead when she noticed that her steps had become unsteady, like she was walking on clouds. One moment, it was going in deep, the next, it wasn't. "My head is spinning," Shirley said. "Of course, you're dizzy. You drank a lot, you're definitely drunk." "Get in the car," he said and helped her into the vehicle. On the other hand, Tony had only drunk half a glass of alcohol and was still sober. At the Flintstone residence, Zacharias sat on the couch, his face dark. He was waiting for those two people who didn't even bother to inform him before leaving. He was quite angry as they had gone out without informing him. Tony drove his car toward the Flintstone residence. After passing through several security checkpoints, it finally drove inside the Flintstone residence. He noticed that Shirley's eyes were closed and wondered if she had fallen asleep. "Goddess, we're here," he called out to her. At that moment, Zacharias, who was in the hall, heard the sound of the car and recognized it was Tony's car. He got up and walked out. As soon as Tony got out of the car, he saw Zacharias standing at the door. His heart skipped a beat and he chuckled nervously. "Uncle Zacharias, you're not asleep yet." He quickly went to the front passenger seat and saw Shirley sleeping inside. He whispered, "Goddess, wake up. Please wake up." He thought he could just take her to her room quietly, but now that Zacharias was here, he really hoped that she would cooperate and not let Zacharias find out about their trip to the bar. Zacharias was waiting for the woman sitting in the front passenger seat to get out of the car but noticed that she hadn't moved after waiting for a while. So, he walked over. Tony's heart was racing, and at this moment, Zacharias appeared next to him. Zacharias caught a faint smell of alcohol in the air at once and noticed Shirley's attire. In an instant, he fixed a sharp gaze on his nephew. "Where have you two been?" he asked sternly. Tony couldn't hide it any longer and stuttered, We went to a bar." Goddess said she was feeling down and wanted to have a drink to cheer up. The moment Zacharias heard the word bar, his anger flared up. He couldn't believe his nephew had led Shirley astray. "Get inside. I'll settle the score with you in a bit," Zacharias said angrily. Tony was trembling with fear, and he ran into the house. Zacharias bent down to look at the girl in the car, who was drunk and had fallen asleep. He reached out to pat her cheek gently. "Shirley, wake up." Shirley pushed his hand away and mumbled, "Don't disturb me." Zacharias undid her seatbelt and used his uninjured hand to help her out of the car. Shirley's steps were unsteady, and she couldn't stand on her own. Her entire body leaned against the man's sturdy chest, and she finally opened her intoxicated eyes while gazing at him before blinking a few times. "Zacharias. Why is it you?" "Let's go to your room," Zacharias said through gritted teeth as he tried to hold back his anger. He was indeed furious, but there was no point in losing his temper with someone drunk. Shirley nodded obediently. "Okay. I can go by myself." After saying this, she seemed like she was about to fall forward as she took a step. Zacharias immediately reached out to support her shoulder and furrowed his brow while saying, "Let me help you." She could only nod and allow him to assist her into the living room. Upon seeing the situation, Tony hurriedly said, "Uncle Zacharias, I'll take her upstairs." "Your hand is still injured." "Go to your room," Zacharias ordered before adding a warning, "If you dare do this again, I'll break your leg." Tony felt a bit aggrieved. Shirley had asked him to accompany her. What else could he do? Zacharias helped Shirley upstairs. She hadn't expected the after effects of the alcohol to hit her so strongly. The rational control she had just maintained had vanished without a trace. Zacharias guided Shirley to the room, and she collapsed onto the bed. She was dressed in a tight blue knit dress, radiating a seductive charm. Her slender legs drew attention as well. His breathing became slightly labored as he gazed at the girl with her hazy and half-open eyes. Her eyes were alluring, and a strand of disheveled hair hung over her forehead, but she couldn't be bothered to fix it. Zacharias let out a faint sigh and instinctively reached out to fix her hair, but as he touched her forehead, it was immediately caught by her slender and white hand. Shirley gazed at him with misty eyes and pouted her red lips slightly while looking somewhat pitiful. She said, "Cole, don't leave me, okay?" Zacharias' heart trembled. She had mistaken him for Cole. How drunk was she to be unable to recognize a person? "Cole, don't go." "I don't want you to leave," Shirley said while holding on to the man's big hand and pressing it against her hot cheek. "Shirley, look carefully and see who I am," he reminded her in a hoarse voice. However, at that moment, Shirley suddenly became more daring as she was emboldened by the alcohol. She firmly grabbed Zacharias' waist, rolled on top of him, and pressed him beneath her. Zacharias' breathing became more rapid. He swallowed hard, and his eyes were filled with anticipation and a trace of anger as he looked at the girl. "Shirley, what are you trying to do?" Zacharias' voice contained a hint of danger. She cupped Zacharias' face. Her drunken state made her believe she was holding Cole's face. Even though the face right in front of her was Zacharias, she couldn't recognize him anymore. Shirley, driven by the effects of alcohol, had one thing in mind. She wanted to kiss Cole. She caressed Zacharias' face, staring at his sensual lips. She breathed softly and closed her eyes before leaning in to kiss him. She kissed him hesitantly as she did not know how to really kiss. Zacharias' eyes turned dark, and he suddenly rolled over, pinning Shirley beneath him. Despite the pain from his shoulder wound and the stinging sensation on his arm, none of it stopped him from doing what he wanted to this intoxicated girl. He wanted to teach her a lesson and make her understand the consequences of mistaking him for someone else. Zacharias pinched the girl's delicate chin, and in the next moment, his thin lips covered her red lips. A scent of alcohol filled the air and intoxicated him. Shirley let out a soft moan. In her mind, the passionate man kissing her right now wasn't anyone else but Cody. Zacharias' kiss was wild and fiery, their lips and tongues intertwined. The kiss struck a chord in her heart. Amidst her drunken state, she became wilder by wrapping her arms around the man's neck and entangling herself with him. Meanwhile, Tony was still worried downstairs. Zacharias' hand was injured, and Shirley was in this state. So, he came upstairs to check. When he arrived at Shirley's room, her door wasn't fully closed, and there was a light inside. When he approached, he was utterly stunned. The man and woman on the bed were tightly entwined. His uncle and Shirley had been passionately kissing for a while. Tony's heart shattered into pieces. Shirley was his goddess. His uncle had really set his sights on her. Zacharias sensed someone at the door, so he suddenly pulled Shirley into his embrace before turning toward the door and said, "Close the door." Tony snorted and closed the door with some irritation. He had been the one to get her drunk, so why was it his uncle who got to kiss her? He felt that it was extremely unfair. Shirley's mind had been clouded by alcohol, and the man's large hand held the back of her head while his other hand controlled her delicate chin. The man's hot and domineering lips roamed across her face, marking her brows, her nose, her cheeks, and even her beautiful collarbone with his kisses. Shirley felt dizzy from the prolonged kiss, and her body instinctively tingled with a warm sensation. At the same time, her hazy eyes seemed to focus a bit. In her semi-conscious state, she suddenly realized that the person kissing her wasn't Cole. Instead, it was Zacharias. "Zacharias, it's you." She had been kissed for several minutes before realizing who was actually kissing her. Zacharias grunted with irritation. Finally figured it out? A pair of dominating yet restrained eyes, now as thick as the night, seemed to contain a wild beast ready to roar and break free at any moment. Shirley was almost on the verge of passing out from the passionate kisses. She suddenly pushed him away like a child and said, "Stop kissing me. You're not allowed to kiss me anymore. Leave." Her feeble protest and rejection had no real authority, but they seemed to ignite a desire in him to tease her until she cried. Are you blaming me when you're the one who won't let go of me? The man spoke, and his warm lips, in her moments of slight clarity, covered her own as they moved in a series of kisses. He was clearly filled with desire, yet he had to restrain himself, making it an agonizing experience. Zacharias. No, Shirley muttered incoherently while pushing at him with her arm, which was usually strong but now felt weak. However, Zacharias' aggression was unstoppable. He moved her hand aside and his lips returned to hers. She emitted a soft and accommodating moan that filled the quiet room with a profound sense of ambiguity. Zacharias was resolved not to go too far with her. He sat up, removed her boots, and gently laid her down on the bed. He then pulled the blanket over her. Shirley was now extremely exhausted and had no desire to open her eyes. At this moment, she felt a warm hand on her forehead and sensed a gentle kiss on her eyebrows. She furrowed her brows and felt like falling asleep. She didn't open her eyes but drifted into slumber. Zacharias finally got up and left the room. Tony was watching TV downstairs. He had realized that Shirley was the woman that Zacharias had taken an interest in. Upon hearing the heavy footsteps behind him, he quickly stood up as if he were a mischievous child about to face a scolding. Who suggested going out? Zacharias asked as he sat down on the couch while raising an eyebrow. Tony could only provide an honest answer. It was her, he said. Curiosity got the better of him, and he inquired, I still don't know her name. Uncle Zacharias, what's her name? You don't need to know her name, Zacharias replied. Why wouldn't I need to know? She's going to be my future aunt. Tony retorted. Zacharias' stern expression wavered slightly. He couldn't help but smirk. What did you say? You're going to make her my aunt, right? Tony continued. Zacharias raised an eyebrow and said, You're not allowed to call her that right now. Tony chuckled and replied, All right. I'll wait until you marry her before I call her that. Zacharias let out a sigh. He was so far from marrying her as the girl still had another man in her heart. How was he going to win her over? All right. Go back to your room and rest. In the future, don't take her to places like bars. Zacharias finally let him off the hook. Tony breathed a sigh of relief. The events of the night seemed to be resolved for now, and he went upstairs to rest. Morning came. Shirley woke up with a throbbing headache from her hangover. She pressed her hand to her forehead and moaned. The hangover left her feeling lethargic and miserable. She got out of bed, went to wash her face, and took a shower. After drying her long hair, she sat on the bed. It was then that she experienced fragments of memories from the night before. It felt like something might have happened in this bed last night. Did she kiss someone while she was here? Or did she dream about kissing Cole? In the end, Shirley was resolute in her belief that it was just her imagination. After all, Cole had left. She couldn't have kissed another man, could she? Shirley glanced at the time and realized it was already 9:30 a.m. She felt like she had been slacking in her internship. She went downstairs and the servant immediately put down her work and said, Miss Lloyd, I'll prepare breakfast for you. Shirley nodded. Please keep it simple. Of course. Has Mr. Flintstone had breakfast? Shirley asked. He had breakfast half an hour ago and left, the servant replied. All right, Shirley said. She picked up a glass of water and was ready to take a sip when she heard footsteps coming down the stairs again. Tony was making his way downstairs and his hair looked a bit disheveled. He spotted Shirley standing in the living room and immediately gave her a somewhat ambiguous smile. Shirley, who noticed his grin, couldn't help but ask, Did you bring me to my room last night? Do you not remember what happened last night? Tony quickly inquired. She was thirsty, so she took a sip of water before saying, I only remember us leaving the bar. After taking another sip, she heard him exclaim loudly, "So, you don't remember kissing my uncle in the room?" Pfft. Shirley sprayed the water onto the floor while gasping in shock. She grabbed a tissue to wipe her mouth and glared at Tony. "What did you say?" Upon seeing her intense reaction, he was taken aback. "Why are you so worked up? Aren't you dating my uncle?" She set down her glass and walked toward Tony, and then grabbed his shirt collar and questioned, "What happened last night? Tell me quickly. Did the scenes in her memory fragment actually happen? Did she really passionately kiss a man in bed?" Tony replied, Okay. Release me first." She let go of him and he continued, "I brought you back from the bar last night. You fell asleep on the way, and when we arrived at the door, my uncle showed up." "And then?" Shirley asked nervously. "Then, my uncle scolded me and took you to your room," he replied helplessly. "Tell me more." Her face had turned somewhat flushed as she had a bad premonition. "Then, you and my uncle stayed in the room for about 15 minutes. I was worried that my uncle's injuries might make it difficult for him to take care of you, so I went upstairs to check. I was shocked to find you too, hee." Tony chuckled knowingly. Shirley's face felt a bit warm and flushed at his smile. "Don't make up stories. Nothing happened between us," she refused to accept it. Tony snorted. "I saw you kissing each other with my own eyes. Are you trying to deny it? Are you refusing to take responsibility for my uncle?" Shirley bit her lip and blushed in embarrassment. She seemed to have grasped more fragments of her memory now. She remembered calling Cole's name and also initiated a kiss. Could she have mistaken Zacharias for Cole and forcefully kissed him? Her beautiful eyes widened and she put her hand to her forehead while wearing an expression of disbelief. "Mr. Tony, I have forgotten everything that happened last night. There's no need for you to remind me." "Thank you," Shirley said before picking up her glass and heading upstairs. She needed to calm down. Tony watched her embarrassed departure and felt somewhat bewildered. Could she really be so picky as to have an issue with Zacharias? She returned to her room and gazed at her bed. Memories from last night assaulted her thoughts. She swallowed hard. If she had mistaken Zacharias for Cole, she was the one who had him pinned beneath her, and she had even initiated the kiss. Oh no! She had forcefully kissed Zacharias. Shirley had never regretted anything in her life, but this was undoubtedly the greatest regret she had ever experienced. Alcohol was indeed a menace, and she decided she would never touch it again. After cooling down, she decided to bid farewell to her feelings for Cole in her heart and vowed never to do something so foolish again.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.